I mean, people want instant gratification. And, I mean, I know a lot of people are very impatient with the Bitcoin price right now. It's kind of stuck at 58 or 60. I'm kind of like, who cares? I mean, this reminds me of, I don't know, it was back in 2019, it was kind of stuck between 5 and 10,000. At some point here within the next year, this thing's going to break through that 70 and not look back. And we're going to go, 120, 150, and wherever.
Welcome back to the channel. In today's clip, we're going to be checking out Larry Lepard's. He's telling you guys what to do and how much you should be investing in Bitcoin. He's also going to be going over the end of the fiat dollar, hyper Bitcoinization, Bitcoin versus gold, and some risks that are being posed to Bitcoin that could potentially stop the progress. So make sure to watch this one to the end. A lot of useful information. Like and subscribe. It helps push this video out to more people so they can learn about Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and play the clip and see what Larry has to say here.
If you're 30 and you can, you know that you've got a long runway in front of you and a lot of earning power and so forth, yeah, if this thing goes up and down a bit, who cares, right? But if you're 60 or 70 and you put all your money into something and it has a 60% drawdown, well, that's kind of bad. I mean, and so I mean, I think older people are right to be somewhat cautious, but that doesn't mean they hold zero. And obviously, I'm glad you talked your father into it because it is the best performing financial asset. It's going to, in my opinion, it's going to continue to be the best performing financial asset. And so it's if you can live through the roller coaster, which, as we all know, kind of never lasts more than 4 years, then you're fine. But if you're on your deathbed and you might need the money, your heirs might need the money in a year or two, well, you probably shouldn't have all your money in Bitcoin. You got to have so it's just a matter of, I mean, it's not a 0 or a 1. I mean, when I'm talking to my older clients, I'm like, look, I'm not asking you to put all your money into Bitcoin. I'm just saying that having 0 Bitcoin is insane because it's got more asymmetry than anything else in the world right now by a large measure. I've never seen anything this good, even at this price. And that's the funny thing I encounter, and I've almost built a ton of golds people, but I encounter a lot of people looking at it and they're making the mistake of fixing on older prices. Well, geez, yeah, I get it for you. You bought it at 5,000, and it's at 60,000 now. How can I pay that much? And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. When I was buying it at 5,000, I was looking at Max Kaiser who bought it at 2. and you kind of just have to get comfortable with the fact that what Saylor said is correct. It is going up forever, Laura. And so, I mean, if you bought it at 60 and it goes to 600 and then it goes to 6 million, both of which I think will occur now over multiple years, you're going to be really glad you bought it at 60. So, but you've got to have patience. Right? Those of us who are in it, know it, have studied it, etc., say that. The only Bitcoiners the only thing I think is a warning to people, and the only time I've seen people get hurt in this, and I think it's incumbent upon all the Bitcoin cheerleaders, and I'm one of them, you're one of them, we all are, we believe in it, is to fully explain to a buyer what they're buying and what it can do. Because the only time I've ever seen anybody get hurt at is when they got all excited about it, they FOMO'd into it right at a peak or near a peak, then it had a big drop, they concluded they were wrong, and they blew it out at the bottom, and that's, I mean, they did part of it right. They bought some, but they didn't do the other part right. They didn't dollar cost average down. They instead let the price convince them that they were in some way wrong, and they sold. Whereas if they just hung on, as we all know, everybody who's been in it for 4 years is ahead, of their cost basis, and I think that pattern will continue. But for an older person who's got risk, aversion, it should be an aggressive part of their portfolio that if it goes down 60%, it's not going to change their lifestyle or scare them, and so I don't know what that means, but I mean, if you're 70 or 80, maybe it's 10% or 20% of your portfolio. But, I think the trend is quite clear. And, how long does it take until hyper Bitcoinization or, the dollar and the fiat currencies totally fail? Yeah, my guess is they might have another 10 years of can kicking in them, but we're getting closer, a lot closer. And if you use the fourth turning model, and these things typically last 20 to 30 years long, and you consider that, the kickoff of this fourth turning was '08. I mean, I think that was a big wake-up call, right? I mean, that's when I really woke up to the fact that, oh my God, these guys are out of control. They're going to print money forever to keep this thing going. 20 years from that would be 2028. 30 years would be 2038. So I feel like there'll be some resolution to this issue in the next 10 years, pretty certainly, probably less. And as the issue comes to get resolved, what'll happen is we'll have enormous inflation, a lot of money printing. They won't be able to stop, and the way a currency fails or quote unquote hyperinflates is when everyone loses confidence in it. And we're starting to see that. I mean, there are two very good clues of that. One is a record high gold price we just achieved. In US dollars, it's over $2,500. I'm sure Australian dollars, it's a record as well. And then, the Bitcoin price is not at a record, but it's awfully close. I mean, record was in the low 70s. We're pretty close to that in the 60s. So, maybe we're a tad below it. And I've also observed historically that when these things move, gold tends to smell things first and move first because it's more broadly distributed and I think more geopolitically sensitive to problems coming. And so, my sense, if the pattern holds from the last few times this happened, my sense is that, in the next, 3 to 6 months, Bitcoin's going to move. It's going to move really hard and faster than gold. I mean, I think Bitcoin's a superior investment to gold if you can handle the volatility. But sometimes it lags it a little bit. I mean, I think just we don't know what the other side will do in terms of the things they could pull out to try to throw sand in our eyes. I mean, they could do a 6102, which would be to confiscate it if they really felt threatened. I think a lot of us wouldn't comply, but that's a different topic. I think that Saylor said one of his concerns. He told me one of his concerns and risks is that just the core developers go rogue. But I don't think there's a likelihood of that, a big likelihood of it. And I think that the way the process of approval of changes gets done, that it's unlikely that the thing will drift in the wrong direction or that we'll have another fork war or another, I should say another block size war. So I think that's one of the risks. It's, I guess it would just be governments get responsible, and I just don't see any evidence of that. That's probably the biggest risk. I mean, in investing, anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen. And I think we have to be prepared for, them trying to somehow change the rules and say they're getting responsible and then maybe throwing a lot of, roadblocks in front of us. I mean, either taxing it heavily or, just making it more difficult. I mean, we saw what they did with Operation Choke Point. I mean, they obviously don't want this to threaten their existing system. And so I think, we have to be creative in our minds of what can they do to try and stop it. And I don't think anything they do to try and stop it will be successful. But I do think, having seen them operate for 40 years and knowing, the way they suppressed gold in the 2013 period and just seeing what they do, we should not underestimate them. And we should not underestimate their ability to throw curveballs at us. And this is why, and this could create big drawdowns, and one has to be kind of ready for that, to kind of quote unquote recognize what we're up against. And we're up against a bunch of people who are very privileged and are trying to defend their system. And, they've got the mechanisms, they got the levers of government, they got a big megaphone with all the press and everything else. Now, we're tearing all that apart by doing podcasts like this and talking to each other on the internet and organizing in conferences and, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all the things they've got, we threaten them and they could come say, we're going to seize all your Bitcoin. And those of us who have it in self-custody will say, yeah, good luck with that. Right. But they could do it. I mean, and that might force people to have to move to different countries or break the law or whatever it might be. I mean, I think we should not, the people who run these governments, in my opinion, are psychopaths. And we should not underestimate what a psychopath will do to try and hang out of their power. We should not be naive and think that, okay, we're just going to kind of peacefully transition over to a Bitcoin standard. These guys are going to just fade away into the dust. I mean, that might happen. I hope that happens. I mean, certainly one thing that's to our advantage is just that, the older psychopaths are dying off. Do you know what I mean? And the younger generation, your generation, is learning about this and is very excited about it. And so, and look, even guys who are deeply flawed and within the fiat system have decided to join us, realizing that they're better off joining us than fighting us. I mean, guys like Larry Fink, right? So we've already got some defections in their ranks, but don't underestimate the possibility that they're going to try and do things to really mess us up. I mean, and this is why I think everybody has to recognize the nature of the fight that we're in and the nature of the asset that we hold. And I don't care if Bitcoin goes to $1. I mean, if Bitcoin goes to $1 a coin, I'm going to buy every single one of them. I mean, right? I mean, it's just there's a point at which it just can't go. I mean, right? I mean, I just don't see. I don't see how they get rid of it. I really don't. I think they finally bumped up against something that it's a case of checkmate now.